Good evening, everybody. You're all very welcome to this meeting of the Pensions Committee. My name is Councillor Pat Cleary. I'm the chair of the committee. I'll just start by reading the webcast notice. So this meeting will be webcast and a record retained on the council website for up to 2 years. By participating in this meeting, you are consenting for your name, the content of what you say, and your image to be broadcast and stored on the council website. If any member, officer or member of the public addressing the committee has concerns with this, please contact the committee services officer immediately. For those at home viewing the webcast, I would like to inform you that if you look above the video, you will see a resource tab. Select this and a link to the agenda will appear in the right-hand side. This will allow you to open the agenda in PDF form and follow the discussion and debate. Can I please remind members that they need to turn their microphone on when speaking, otherwise what they say will not be captured on the webcast. Please can I also ask that members turn their microphone off when not speaking. Thank you. I'll move on to apologies. I've had apologies from Councillor Povall and Councillor David Burgess-Joyce is substituting for Cherry. I've also had apologies from Councillor Paulette Lappin. Are there any other apologies? No. Okay, thank you for that. Just like to say we've got several new members to the committee here this evening. So I'd like to welcome Councillors Joe Bird, Helen Collinson, Tony Cox and Jeff Green. And I'd also like to thank those departing councillors for their contribution to the work of the committee in the past. That's Councillors George Davies, Steve Fowkes, Andrew Gardner and Tony Jones. Right, item 3 is the Members' Code of Conduct, Declarations of Interest. Members of the committee are asked to declare any disclosable pecuniary and non-pecuniary interests in connection with any items on the agenda and state the nature of the interest. Are there any declarations of interest? Councillor Rowlands?
By virtue that my wife works for the council and is in the pension scheme.
Thank you, Les. Helen?
I'm a deferred member of the pension scheme.
Thanks, Helen. Joe?
My partner's a member of the pension scheme.
Thanks for that. That it? Lovely. Thanks for that, everybody. Okay, item 4 are the minutes of the last meeting. So we are asked to approve the accuracy of the minutes of the meeting held on the 29th of March 2021. So can I move approval of the minutes and ask for a seconder? Who was there on the night? Thank you, Brian. Okay. Can I take approval of the minutes by assent? Is that agreed? Thanks very much. Okay, before we move to item 5 on the official agenda, we do have a question from a member of the public. I'm just going to pass over to our legal officer, Colin Hughes, is going to just briefly explain the procedure. Colin.
Okay. Yes, Chair. In accordance with the Council's constitution, a member of the public has given notice of a question that she wishes to ask the Chair about the pension fund's investment in companies involved in Israel's occupation of Palestine. She will be allowed 2 minutes to put the question. According to the Council's constitution, the question shall be put and answered without discussion by the committee. The Chair may decline to answer or give a written answer. If he gives an oral answer, he is also restricted to 2 minutes. The questioner may ask a supplementary question which arises directly out of her original question or the Chair's reply. If she does so, she is allowed 1 minute to put that question. If the Chair decides to answer the supplementary question, he is allowed 2 minutes to do so. Again, no discussion will take place by the committee on the supplementary question and any answer given to it. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks for that, Colin. And just to say, according to the standing orders, as Colin has outlined, we will have this as a standing item on future committee agendas. Can I invite the member of the public to step forward and ask the question, please? Hi, you're very welcome. If you'd just like to introduce yourself and ask your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'm Ruth Molyneux and I live in Eastham. A few weeks ago, I attended a protest outside Birkenhead Library. The people gathered there were cross-community and cross-party, but we had one commonality: peace for Palestine. Peace, peace, peace. Palestinian refugee children spoke so movingly for peace in their homeland. They, like all Palestinian refugees, have no right to return to the land of their birth under Israeli law. Large corporations across the world make hundreds of millions of pounds in profit from their misery. Desmond Tutu once said, "If you're neutral in a situation of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor." That is why I'm here today. The people of Palestine have been living under occupation and denied their human rights for more than 50 years. 1.9 million Palestinians are cut off from the outside world by a blockade of Gaza. And 4 million live under an Israeli occupation that continues to build illegal settlements that segregates them behind a wall. There are many companies that are profiting from this illegal breach of human rights. Does the Merseyside Pensions Fund invest in any such companies? And if so, how much does it invest?
Thanks for that, Ruth. If you wouldn't just mind turning your microphone off. Lovely. Thank you for your question, a very important question, and I'm sure everybody would deplore the effects of the Israel and Palestinian conflict. I've got an oral answer for you, but you will receive this in writing as well subsequently, okay? So the fund takes its responsibilities as an asset owner seriously, and human rights are a fundamental element of those responsibilities. Our policy of responsible investment reflects the view that environmental, social, and corporate governance, or ESG factors, can materially affect investment performance. Accordingly, we take ESG issues seriously and place importance on active ownership in managing and shaping ESG matters. We principally do this through collaborative working, whether that is with other local government pension schemes through the Local Authority Pension Fund Forum, or LAP, or with our northern local government pension scheme partner funds, which are Greater Manchester and West Yorkshire. We also appoint a third party, which is currently pensions and investment research consultants, who assist us in fulfilling our fiduciary responsibility as a long-term investor. Where we become aware that companies may be involved in breaches of international law or complicit in human rights abuses, we seek to engage with companies in order to gather information and evidence. Our objective is to see that companies are acting in accordance with their responsibilities to respect human rights as detailed by the United Nations Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights. In relation to your question, we are advised that the fund is invested in some companies featuring in a database created by the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights of business enterprises involved with or operating in the occupied territories. Those companies are Alstom Europe, Bank Hapoalim, Booking Holdings Incorporated, Expedia Group Incorporated, General Mills Incorporated, the Mizrahi Tefahot Bank Limited, and Motorola Solutions Incorporated. And our total investments across those 7 companies is currently valued at £2.74 million. In the main, these are large international companies with wide-ranging interests. Consistent with our policy, we are engaging with them to understand how they are addressing the reputational implications of their activities. Useful further understanding and context of the issues has been gained. LAF has also met with the UN Special Rapporteur to discuss the companies linked to the occupied territories. The advice received remains that we need to give the engagement process time, but that we also give companies a clear sense of human rights expectations and why they are considered to fall short. Recently, LAP sent clear messages to the boards of 2 of our invested companies, advising its members to vote against the re-election of certain directors for their inadequate responses thus far to investor engagement on this issue. Through the Northern Local Government Pension Scheme, we have asked our advisors to review our responsible investment policy and enhance it in the areas of climate change and human rights. And I would specifically refer you to page 116 of the public reports pack this evening, which details the minutes of the last Northern LGPS meeting, where I specifically raised our engagement with the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign and asked for our policy on human rights to be enhanced. That's referenced in the minutes on that page. So our advisors will be reporting back to the July meeting of the Northern LGPS, and the responsible investment policy will be brought to this committee for review as soon as possible, but no later than our November committee. So I trust this provides you with the assurance that this matter is treated seriously by the fund. And I would ask you, Ruth, do you have any supplementary question on the basis of what you've heard?
Does the Pensions Committee agree with me that it's a priority to investigate the issue and consider special proposals at its next meeting to divest pension funds from companies assisting in the violation of Palestinian human rights?
Okay, thanks for that. Well, we do take human rights seriously, as I have outlined, particularly in cases where companies are operating in conflict areas. Our policy, as I've stated, is under review, but I would advise that that policy has to operate within the legal framework that is set down by government. As I've also said, the policy will return to the committee no later than November, and at that stage it's up to this committee to discuss, debate and review that policy and satisfy itself that the policy is robust enough to deal with the issues that you have raised this evening. So thanks very much for that, Ruth. Thanks again for your question. Okay, we will proceed on to item 5, the audit plan on the agenda. I'm actually going to take items 5 and 6 together, if that's okay. We'll have a presentation on the audit plan from Stuart Basnett from Grant Thornton, and then under item 6, Donna Smith, our Head of Finance and Risk, will deal with the questions that the auditor has asked specifically to the fund. So we'll take items 5 and 6 together, and then we'll deal with any questions or comments. So Stuart, thanks for coming along. Nice to see you again, and over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So yeah, my name is Stuart Basnett. I'm the External Audit Manager for the fund, and my role is to plan and manage the day-to-day delivery of the external audit. And so here today to present the external audit plan for the financial year 2021. So this document provides you with an overview of the planned scope and timing of the statutory audit, and it is in accordance with auditing standards, and it covers both our opinion on the financial statements as well as the separate opinion that we issue on the consistency of the financial statements with the fund's annual report. Our audit approach is based on a thorough understanding of the fund's systems and processes, and it is risk-based. So I intend to talk you through the key aspects of the plan, which are outlined on page 10 of the agenda pack, titled Introductions and Headlines, and then I'm happy to take any questions which members might have. So as mentioned, our audit approach is risk-based, and so we tailor our audit responses to focus more on the bigger, riskier area of the accounts. And so I'll start with the significant risks identified for the audit. So these are the key areas of focus for the audit. They require special consideration due to their inherent complexity, estimation uncertainty, subjectivity, and due to the potential for fraud. So all of the risks identified for this year should be familiar to members, as they are in keeping with our audit approach from prior years. So the first risk identified is management override of controls. And so under auditing standard ISA 240, there is a non-rebuttable presumption for all audits that there's an inherent risk of fraud due to management overriding controls. And so that's the primary reason why that risk has been included in our audit plan. So the key response to this risk is to review a selection of journals posted by management in the year to check that there's a genuine business rationale for those journals, that the coding of what's been moved from where and to where is appropriate, and that any authorization process has been appropriately followed. We also review any estimates made by management to ensure that the key assumptions used in those estimates do not contain any indicators of management bias, and where applicable, we will review any transactions outside of the usual course of business. The second risk is in relation to the valuation of directly held investment property, and this is an area of focus that we've been gradually sort of increasing the level of challenge and testing year on year that we perform based on feedback from our regulator, the FRC. So our plan procedures this year include engaging with the Trust's external valuer and discussing and challenging with both them and management over the key assumptions applied in the estimate. We have also engaged our own valuation expert to assist us in gaining assurance that the valuation is appropriate. There is one change for this year's audit, which is the amendment to auditing standard ISA 540, which relates to the accounting estimates. And that again adds a further level of challenge that we need to offer to management around accounting assumptions, around assumptions used in accounting estimates. There is more detail on those changes within pages 13 and 14 of our report, but I don't propose to go into the detail of that now. The final risk is the valuation of level 3 investments. So these are the complex and hard to value investments. Their value is derived by unobservable inputs. So you can't readily go and trace their value back to a stock market, for example. They represent another significant estimate by management, and so are sensitive to key changes in assumptions. As at the prior year account, the value of these investments was circa 2 billion, so they do represent a sizable proportion of the balance sheet, and they mostly relate to unquoted equities and pooled investment funds. In terms of materiality, so each year we determine a materiality level, which is a threshold above which we report errors or omissions. What's the threshold above which we deem that errors or omissions might reasonably affect the decisions of users of the accounts. For this year, we've set our planning materiality at 0.9% of the fund's net assets as at the end of Jan 21, and this equates to roughly 87.7 million. So the basis of 0.9% of net assets is a small reduction on the prior year basis, which was 1%, and this is largely due to Grant Thornton as a whole evaluating all of the LGPS audits that Grant Thornton do, and the 1% level is the highest threshold you can set, and so we've reserved that for sort of the lower value, lower complexity and lower risk LGPS funds, due to Merseyside being sort of one of the larger audits that we do with a high proportion of level 3 investments and also some internally managed investments. That's the reason why we've reduced materiality by 0.1% to just sort of consider that added complexity to this audit. You will notice, however, that the actual pound value of materiality is fairly similar to last year, and that's due to the strong performance of the fund and the investment value increasing. We also set a triviality level, which is the threshold above which we report any errors or amendments to the accounts in our audit findings report, and so this is set at 5% of materiality, which equates to 4.3 million. In terms of logistics, our interim audit took place back end of March and early April remotely, and so we gained a good understanding of the processes and controls in place at the fund. And whilst we are currently just finalising our NHS audits, we do intend to start work on the audit of the fund's accounts at the start of July. The plan is to complete the majority, if not all the work, by the time that it comes to the September committee to report to you our findings. However, members will be aware that the actual formal signing of our opinion, that can't take place until Wirral Council's audit is also in a position to sign off their accounts. And so, as with last year, where I think we finally signed off in January, there is a chance that the formal signing of the opinion could be after the 30th of September. We will be ensuring, though, that we complete all of our audit work on the fund by the end of September, because as well as delivering an opinion on the fund's accounts, we also provide assurance to auditors of omitted bodies for the purpose of the investment figures in their accounts. And obviously we don't, if they might be working to a September 30th deadline, and we want to ensure that they hit that target. So finally, I'd just like to confirm and reiterate our independence from the pension fund and also from the council as your external auditors, and I'm happy to take any questions, Chair.
Okay, thanks very much for that, Stuart. If it's okay, we'll take Donna's report on item 6, because I think that would just better inform the whole discussion, because, you know, it's a report on the fund's responses to the questions posed by the auditors. So if that's okay with committee, I'll hand over to Donna for item 6, and then if there's any questions for either Stuart or Donna, we can take them then. Thanks, Donna.
Thank you, Chair. So MPF is statutorily required to prepare a set of financial statements which are included within Wirral Council's accounts and MPF's annual report. The accounts are prepared in accordance with the Code of Practice on Local Authority Accounting in the UK, based on International Financial Reporting Standards amended for UK public sector. The financial statements are currently being prepared along with the working papers and will be subject to audit, as Stuart has just advised, over the summer. And they will then be presented to this committee in September. As part of the audit, Grant Thornton have requested management to respond to a series of questions which are included along with the fund's responses in the pack, in the appendix, which can be found in the pack on page 31. The external audit approach in previous years was to request management to complete a questionnaire, as well as the chair of the Audit and Risk Management Committee. For 2020-21, the approach is for management to respond to the questions and for the questions and responses to be reviewed by Pensions Committee, and for committee to consider whether these responses are consistent with its understanding and whether there are any other comments committee wishes to make. Therefore, the purpose of this report is to request members review and endorse the management responses to the questions posed by the auditors. It is presented to members to support you with your responsibilities in relation to financial reporting process, to provide you and the auditors with assurances that the fund has adequate processes and oversight in place to minimise the risk of error. This will inform the auditor's risk assessment, where the auditor is required to make inquiries of Pensions Committee under accounting standards. The completed questionnaire provides members with an understanding of management processes and strengthens the fund's oversight in particular areas that could have a significant impact upon the financial statements. There are 5 areas within the questionnaire. The first area can be found on page 36, which is general inquiries of management. To highlight MPF responses to this section includes question 1, is the key issues that will have an impact or potential impact on the financial statements for 2020-21. Obviously, COVID is detailed within the response. There was significant market volatility at the beginning of the pandemic. However, fund valuations have recovered during the year. Valuations of our properties, as Stuart Grant Thornton has previously just advised, these were valued on the basis of material uncertainty in March 2020. However, that uncertainty has been removed for the March 21 valuation. Remote working was introduced on a large scale during the year due to the pandemic as well. Also highlighted in terms of significant issues are contributions this year will be higher than previous years. This is due to a number of our employers paying their contributions up front. Another area is property rental income. The fund has moved to monthly accounting and changed its accounting policy. This has resulted in reporting additional rent in the period. This is detailed further on question 2 when we talk about accounting changes. Rental income is highlighted here and explains to members that an additional narrative will be included within the accounts to explain to the reader and to try to avoid any misinterpretation. Question 3 is that details that MPF does use derivatives, but explains that we use derivatives to manage risk. Section 2 of the questionnaire, can be found on page 40 and is fraud. The auditor is seeking assurances from Management and Pensions Committee that the accounts are free from material misstatement and error due to fraud or error. The responses, whilst recognising that there is inherent risk of fraud, the fund has a strong control environment and engages with both internal and external auditors on emerging risks. Section 3 can be found at page 47, and that's laws and regulations. The auditor is seeking assurances that the financial statements are free from fraud and error, and seeks assurances that the fund is compliant with laws and regulations. On page 50 is section 4, which is related parties. The auditor is seeking assurances that related party procedures and transactions are correctly disclosed. The approach and procedures followed this year has not changed from that in previous years. And then page 53 of the pack is accounting estimates. The auditor is seeking assurances over accounting estimates and needs to assess the internal control environment and the use of accounting estimates. Significant accounting estimates are not calculated by MPF management, so management also seek assurances that significant estimates are reasonable and prepared under proper guidance. For example, property valuations are valued by an independent valuation following the Red Book. The assumptions used and the inputs into the valuation process are reasonable and signed off by fund officers. Unquoted investments use estimates when producing valuations, as well as ongoing due diligence of all investments by the investments team for the life of the investment. Their audited statements are reviewed by fund officers, linking the valuations of the fund to the valuation included within MPF's financial statements. The report is asking Pensions Committee to consider the responses and to determine whether they are consistent with its understanding and whether they wish to make any further comments. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks for that, Donna, and thanks again, Stuart. Just a quick question from me, really. I'm not sure which of you wants to answer this. I'm happy to take it from either of you, but in 3.3, Donna, you talk about the change in the external audit approach. I'm just wondering, could we get clarification on exactly why that's changed and what's prompted it? Sorry, section 3.3, it talks about the external audit approach in previous years was to request management to complete a questionnaire, but now that's obviously changed. So I'm just wondering why the change?
Yeah, so that is partly due to the amendment to ISA 540, the accounting estimate standard. And so a key element of that standard is to ensure that we're satisfied that those charge of governance are appropriately informed by management of the key aspects of the fund, the key assumptions involved in estimates as well. And so it's more, I guess, a more streamlined approach to ensure that the correct information is flowing its way through to the committee, rather than having those two separate documents. They're largely the same questions. It's just felt that it's a more efficient and beneficial way for us to get that assurance that the committee is informed.
Very clear, thanks, Stuart. Any questions for Stuart or Donna? I'll take Brian first.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. First of all, to thank Stuart and Donna for their presentations. Obviously, COVID-19 has had a dramatic effect on many people and organisations across the world, and we hear every day about some organisations literally going bust, etc. But am I right in assuming, if I've heard the presentation correctly, and I think the phrase in there somewhere did say the effects have not been overly significant. So overall, am I right in assuming that the reports we've had today are fairly positive, given the serious situation that we're in with COVID? So all in all, it's something that we should welcome as a committee. Have I read the reports right, Chair? Thank you.
Well, Stuart did refer to the strong performance of the fund, that's for sure. Do you want to comment on that, Stuart? And if Donna wants to say anything after that?
Yeah, well, that was in relation to our materiality level. So, like I said, obviously we reduced materiality by about 0.1%, but the pound value of the threshold hasn't changed, and that is due to the increased valuation of the assets as at the end of Jan compared to the end of March 2020, obviously reflecting the increase in value in the markets.
Just to add, Chair, obviously I think I highlighted in my presentation a couple of points with regards to fund valuations. There was a lot of market volatility at March 20, which that has recovered. We're still in the middle of a pandemic, so which will take a long time in terms of recovery. So some of the impacts are still to be seen, maybe. One of the areas one of the areas that has struggled through is we own a number of direct properties, so therefore our property rental income. A lot of our tenants have struggled with the lockdowns. Our property managers are working hard with our tenants and negotiating recovery and collection, and have recovered and done a great job on that. In terms of the working operations of the fund, we, on a large scale, moved most people to remote working, which and that, I think, Grant Thornton commented in their report, has been seen as a success. So whilst some projects we have delayed and deferred because of the pandemic, overall in terms of pension, paying pensions and in terms of collecting contributions, minimum impact.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks, Donna and Stuart. Jeff, you had a question?
Yes, thank you, Chair. Just good points. It's worth noting, I think, that during the pandemic, our sickness levels were broadly consistent. So I think that's a real, I think that's what it says in the report, which is a real credit to those people that were organising our workforce and our workforce itself. Mine is slightly more of a general point, if that's all right, Chair, and it doesn't just apply to the pension fund or this committee, also when I was chairman of Audit and Risk as well. We're talking about audit and we're talking about risk, which I think has become generally more central to everything that we do. Everything seems to be about risk at the moment, and yet it was Donna who gave the report, very good report, very thorough with all the things. Shouldn't it really have been Peter? So we tend to do that with the council. And if we're talking about governance, is the centrality of risk properly recognised if it's kind of hived off to finance to talk about, as opposed to the centrality of it being the director that reports on it? Just a question.
Okay. Thanks, Jeff. That's what you're here for. Yeah. Did you want to comment, Peter?
I'm not an accountant, so I'm very thankful that I have Donna as an accountant to manage the finance function for me, as I'm thankful that I have Yvonne to oversee the pensions administration side, because she has the best knowledge at the fund of the pensions, the LGPS administration regulations. And again, Guy is here to oversee operations and information governance for me. I trust that I play a part in coordinating that. My background is more on the investment side, but we work closely together as a management team, and we discuss risks monthly at our internal meeting, and then it goes to both our risk register goes to the local pension board at its quarterly meetings and to the governance and risk working party.
Thanks for that, Peter. Is that okay, Jeff? Yeah. It is what it is, yeah. Well, I can certainly endorse what Peter has said, and we have our pension board, which we'll come to later, the work that they do, and the governance and risk meetings as well, where all of that is reviewed as well. Okay. Anybody else want to ask? Chris?
Thank you, Chair. Okay, my questions are going to be on the report on the fraud risk assessments, and I'm hoping the answer is going to be because we're absolutely brilliant. But I'm reading through these, and to give you an example, on page 43, the question is: are you aware of any instances of actual suspected or alleged fraud? The answer is no. Have you identified any specific fraud risks? The answer is no. All the way through, there's no, none. I find that a little bit incredible that there is no fraudulent attempt on this pension committee fund. So is it because there hasn't been any, or is that we don't know any? Because one of the questions was, are you aware of any? And the answer is no, we're not. Is that because there hasn't been any, or that we don't know about them?
Okay, so if I answer that, in terms of the fraud, obviously there's inherent risk of fraud in financial institutions and pension funds. We have a strong internal control environment, which is constantly under review as well. We have a service level agreement in terms of with our internal auditors who do extensive work at the fund, and I'm not aware that there is any incidences of fraud that have been detected that would have a material impact on the financial statements, which is the particular question. There is inherent fraud, as I've stated, but there's nothing that has been identified. We participate in National Fraud Initiative. We will undertake where there's potential areas of fraud, which are fully investigated. Our reports, as I say, from the internal auditors are positive. They report minimum organisational risk in terms of the risk levels. And it's constantly under review in terms of the activities that we take and how we manage those risks.
If I may, Chair, because again on page 44 it says, are there any areas where there's a potential for misreporting? And the answer comes, there's no areas identified. That's not the same as saying no, there isn't. So does that what you've just explained, would that apply to the same issue? Thanks, Donna.
Thanks for that. Did you want to comment on that at all, Stuart, as the external auditors? Do you want to make a brief?
Yeah, I guess what I'd add to it is, I think in prior years there have been sort of small level frauds, which Donna's made us aware of sort of really low value, maybe low thousands. Obviously, the key element from the external point of view is material fraud, because we are issuing an opinion that the accounts are true and fair, and that takes into account our materiality level, which, as you be aware, is around 87 million. So where other areas of fraud are identified, we would sort of investigate them just as to understand the reasons for that, were there any failings in processes and controls, which might have a wider sort of impact across the fund. However, we're not aware of any such areas, obviously, from discussions with Donna and Peter and internal audits so far for this year. But we do keep that line of inquiry open, and then at the end of our audit, it's another question which we ask of management to confirm once again, and we also discuss with legal and internal audit to see if they are aware of any frauds, if that helps.
Thanks, Stuart, and thanks for the question, Chris. A really, really good and important question. Not seeing any other hands raised on these items. So in that case, I will go to the recommendations, which are that the committee be recommended to review and endorse the management responses to questions posed by the fund's external auditors, Grant Thornton. And if I may, I'd just like to add a brief additional recommendation that committee notes the contents of the audit plan and thanks Grant Thornton for their presentation to the committee. So I'll move those recommendations. Can I get a seconder? Thank you, Jeff. Can we agree that by assent? Lovely. Thank you, committee. Thanks, Stuart. Thanks, Donna. Okay, item 7 is the local government pension scheme update, and we'll hand over to Yvonne Murphy, the head of pensions administration. Evening, Yvonne.
Thank you, Chair. This report covers the McLeod remedy along with industry-wide issues impacting on the administration of the LGPS. The first section of the report informs members that Luke Hall has issued a statement on the remedy for McLeod and the LGPS. For new members of committee, I've given a brief summary of events starting with the Court of Appeal's ruling in December 2018. This confirmed that protections given to judges and firefighters as part of the reform of public sector pension schemes were age discriminatory. This was because eligibility for the protections was based on the age of the member, as was the case across all other public service pension schemes. In the LGPS, the protections took the form of a final salary underpin to the new career average structure that was implemented in 2014. The protection applied to anybody who was in 10 years of normal retirement age at the 1st of April 2012. This underpin means that the member will receive an additional amount of pension if the care benefit is lower than the final salary benefits for membership up to the 31st of March 2022 from the 1st of April 2014. And following the government's pledge to remove this discrimination, MHCLG published a consultation on the remedy last July, and there is a link to the document within the report. The consultation closed on the 8th of October, and the government's response is expected later this year. So as an interim measure, the ministerial statement from Luke Hall outlines the high-level policy position for removing age discrimination within the LGPS, and the key changes are listed within paragraph 3.5 of my report. Primary legislation will be required to introduce the amendments, and MHCLG will then publish the draft regulations for the LGPS later this year. This will allow lead-in time to implement the McLeod provisions for the April 2023 implementation date. Whilst we await the draft regulations, fund officers have undertaken a project to identify qualifying members, and we're currently verifying relevant data. We're also working with the system provider on bulk data extraction and upload tools, and we are members of the LGA Communications Working Group, which is looking to develop standard communications for members across the LGPS, because this is a national issue. The next section of my report refers to the cost management of the public sector pension schemes, and section 3.9 to 3.13 refers to the cost management of the scheme and notes the statutory requirement to review the cost of the reform schemes to ensure they remain affordable and sustainable to the taxpayers. There are two processes running in tandem. One is an employer cost cap determined by the Treasury, and then there's a future service cost process operated by the Scheme Advisory Board. The 2016 review was paused in 2019 due to the uncertainties associated with the McLeod judgment. But now the case has proceeded through the Court of Appeal, and the government has accepted the need to remove age discrimination. The cost management process has been restarted. Treasury has confirmed that the McLeod remedy will be taken into account in its process, but if it leads to a breach of the cost cap, a reduction to member benefits will not be applied through this process. The Scheme Advisory Board are still deliberating about their cost management process for the LGPS, and an announcement is expected during the summer. And then the final section of the report covers Treasury's consultation on the increase of the minimum pension age from 55 to 57. The Fund's response to the consultation is attached as an appendix and was shared with the Chair of the Pensions Committee and also the independent Chair of the Local Pension Board before I made my submission to the Treasury. The main point of concern is that the increase will be unpopular, as this will require employees to work both longer and lock away money longer than is currently the case. That is a summary of my report, but I'm happy to take any questions from any of the areas within the report, Chair. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Yvonne, and my thanks to you for sharing your response on changing the minimum pension age in advance with myself and the Chair of the Pension Board. I guess for new members of the committee, welcome to the McLeod judgment and the complexities involved therein. It's been a running theme on Pensions Committee for many years, and it is certainly imposing additional administrative burdens on the committee, which I think Yvonne has explained. Does anybody have any questions, comments? Chris?
Thanks, Chair. Yvonne, this might be a bit unfair, but I'm going to ask you a personal opinion here. How detrimental to the fund is this going to be when we actually get the information back from the government on what they're intending to do? Is it going to be huge or minute?
No, I think my personal opinion is it's not going to be a massive impact on liabilities. We obviously already have the underpin that's in place, and from my knowledge, since 2014, we haven't had any case that we've had to pay an underpin amount for. The reason being really is when we've moved to the care scheme, the accrual rate is moved from a 60th to a 49th. That's where your pension builds up, and that's a 22% increase in the accrual rate. And most people don't receive a 22% increase in their pensionable pay. So from my understanding is, I doubt that we're going to see many cases which are going to be affected by this underpin, because the care scheme is usually better.
If I may, Chair, do you think that we're not going to lose members or through it?
We're not going to lose members to it?
Yeah.
In what way? Can you just explain your question?
Yeah, either moving the pensions to some other scheme, or whether they're not willing to carry on the extra years, or...
I don't think we'll lose members, because I think the membership, the scheme's a really good scheme, and this underpin is just going to be an addition. So an addition to what's already a fabulous scheme. So no, we don't lose members from it. It might cause a cost to the employers, so it might be an issue for employers if there was a lot of, if my assumptions are incorrect, and there's going to be a lot of people who are going to benefit from the underpin. It will be a cost to the fund, but sorry, to the employers. But that's what's going to be getting managed under the cost management process. That's what the government are looking at.
Thanks.
Okay, but I don't think now. People won't move away from the scheme because it's a benefit.
Okay, thanks, Chris. Thanks, Yvonne. At least the government is finally starting to provide some clarity around this, so at least we know what we think we know what we're going to be dealing with, and can deal with it appropriately. Okay, I'm not seeing any other hands raised, so in that case, I will move to the recommendation that the committee note the operational implications emerging from impending changes to the regulations and industry developments. I'll move that recommendation. Can I have a seconder?
Yeah, happy to second that.
Thanks, Les. Can we take that by assent agreement? Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Yvonne. Right, item number 8 is the budget outturn for 2021 and the final budget for 21-22 on pages 75 to 82. Donna Smith, our Head of Pensions Administration, will come in on this again. Thanks, Donna.
Thank you, Chair. Every year we bring 2 reports on the budget to Pensions Committee, one in February-March time and one now. So in March, a budget report was presented to Pensions Committee that projected the spend for 2020-21 and also requested approval for the 21-22 budget subject to updated central support recharges. The figures presented to March Committee can be found as Appendix 2, which is page 81 of the pack. It was agreed a further report to be presented, and that's the purpose of this report. It's to request members note the actual expenditure for the financial year just gone, 2020-21, and to approve the finalised budget for the financial year 21-22. The actual spend in the finalised budget can be found as Appendix 1, page 79 of the report pack. Appendix 1 of the report, as well as the updated figures, provides some headline information that hopefully puts some of the figures reported into context. The fund value as at 31st of March 21 was 9.9 billion. It's estimated that MPF will pay 368 million in pensions and receive 172 million in contributions from employers and employees. The membership numbers are also included, with total membership exceeding 140,000. For 2020-21, the budget approved by Pensions Committee in 2020, and that can be seen in the left-hand column, and that was 23 million. The actual expenditure for the year was 21.5 million and is shown in the middle column within the appendix. The underspend is largely due to planned projects and areas of work being deferred to 21-22 as a result of the pandemic, and also some of the assumptions that were used for staffing. These underspends can be seen under the employees and the supplies sections within the appendix. The 21-22 budget report in March, the 21-22 budget report in March has been reviewed, and it actually remains the same as that reported and approved in March. So the finalised 21-22 budget is 25.5 million and is the right-hand column of the appendix. The majority of the pension fund budget is taken up by investment management costs and staffing. The investment management arrangements are subject to ongoing review with additional scrutiny from the Northern LGPS Joint Committee. MPF is part of the Northern LGPS pool, which is three LGPS funds: Merseyside Pension Fund, West Yorkshire Pension Fund and Greater Manchester Pension Fund, set up to comply with national reform of how LGPS investments are managed. Reduced costs and excellent value for money is a pooling criterion, and investment management fees are a significant element of the fund's costs. The fund and the Northern LGPS use CEM to benchmark investment management fees and analyse these costs in the context of risk and return, and relative to other LGPS funds and private pension funds internationally. The information is used by the fund and the Northern LGPS to ensure the effectiveness of the fund's expenditure in this key area. The CEM benchmarking report for 2020-21, when available, will be reported to a future working party. The proposed admin cost of 25.5 million, which includes 17.4 million of investment management charges to external managers, represents a cost of £182.35 per member of the scheme, or 0.26% of assets under management. Thank you, Chair. Happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Donna, and apologies for giving you the wrong job title. You are, of course, the Head of Finance and Risk. Any questions on Donna's report? Jeff?
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and apologies, Donna, because I'm a new member to the committee, so just trying to get my bearings around this element of the budget. Now, I see it's all recharged back to the pension fund, I think is what it says in the report. But I suppose my question for the local authority and the local authorities that are, combined for the fund, when the amount of revenue we are paying, does that get calculated in the total amount that the local authority or local authorities have to pay? So your 25 million, whatever it is that then added to the council's revenue budget as revenue and would then count in terms of when we get up to the cap and so on? Or is it offset and zeroed when it goes through into the local authority? Am I kind of making myself clear? Sorry.
I think so.
Yeah, okay.
So the pension fund will have a nil impact on the revenue of the council. So the pension fund has its own separate bank accounts. All its transactions are currently going through separate bank accounts, and whilst there will be, if there is expenditure in the council's accounts, it will be offset with the equivalent income to make a net impact of zero.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, Donna. Anybody else want to raise a comment or question? Okay, no more hands going up. It's much easier on Teams when you can see the hands going up virtually instead of this big room where you have to look all the way around. Okay, we'll then move to the recommendations that the Pensions Committee note the outturn for 2021 and that the committee approves the finalised budget for 21-22. I'll move that recommendation. Can I have a seconder? Thank you, Jeff. Can we agree that by assent? Thank you, committee. Okay, item 9 is the Member Learning and Development Programme, which our Director of Pensions, Peter Wallach, will present.
Thank you, Chair. As there were a number of new members on committee, I thought I would bring this report partly to set out the expectations in terms of members of committee and also to assure members that we do provide training and development opportunities. So the report sets out under section 3 the fact that there's increasing scrutiny of public sector pension schemes. The Public Service Pension Act of 2013 introduced new governance legislation, including the establishment of the local pension board. In addition, MHCLG and the Scheme Advisory Board, which is a national board overseeing the LGPS, have set the highest standards of expectations in terms of governance in the LGPS. Under section 3.2, I refer to the Markets in Financial Instruments Directive 2, which came out in January 2018. This was an EU requirement that effectively meant that local authorities were deemed to be retail investors, and there was a need to opt up to professional investor status, which required a certain level of knowledge and understanding, which is assessed from time to time. So that's another reason for committee members to be able to demonstrate knowledge and understanding. Under section 3.4, we use CIPFA, who have developed a technical knowledge and skills framework for the LGPS, and it's a useful way of ensuring that both members and officers and those participating in the fund have an appropriate mix of knowledge and skills. There's a statutory requirement that we report on both the training events offered and attended by elected members, and that's included in our annual report. The appendix to this report attaches an outline of training opportunities that we're aware of, but the way that it generally works is that as well as those, as and when opportunities become available, I make members aware of that, and there's an opportunity to opt to participate. Section 3.7 just reminds members that the investment monitoring working parties are a useful development tool as well, that we have a number of external professional investors attending, and the deliberative nature of them is I think, quite an interactive way. And then finally, section 3.8, we do recommend the Local Government Pensions Committee organised fundamentals course for all new members of committee, and indeed existing members are welcome to avail themselves of it. As the report sets out, it's over 3 days, over October, November, December, in 3 different locations, and it's possible to mix and match to suit diaries if members are able to make the time to do that. And then I just conclude by saying that we are investigating opportunities for both online learning or bespoke training opportunities. So the report is there for members' information, Chair.
Thank you, Peter. Yeah, just you referenced the fundamentals training, and just to say those have been taking place face-to-face over recent years. They're particularly relevant, I think, for members of committee, particularly if you're new. You've probably already picked up that pensions is quite technical and complex, so that aspect of the training programme is particularly recommended to you. I did notice that the dates for London offer a hybrid option, so I don't have the full details on that, but you can obviously participate in that training on a virtual basis. You don't have to physically be there, so that's worth bearing in mind. So obviously the appendix details all of the training opportunities that are available. I would encourage everybody to look carefully at that and engage as appropriate. Anybody have any questions for Peter? Are we happy to move straight to the recommendations? Yep. Okay, good. So recommendations are that the committee note the report and approve the proposed learning and development plan for 2021. I'll move that. Can somebody second? Thanks, Les. And we can agree by assent, hopefully. Very good. Thank you. Thank you, Peter. Right, item 10 is the Taskforce for Climate-Related Financial Disclosure Reporting, and Peter's going to report on this as well.
Yes, apologies for the title of the report, but that's how it's described. As Section 3 sets out, the fund has been developing its response to climate risk over the last 5 years or so, and one of the provisions of the recent UK Pension Schemes Act of 2021 was a requirement for trustees to ensure that there is effective governance of schemes with respect to the effects of climate change, and to publish information relating to the effects of climate change on the scheme. and this is set out in the Taskforce on climate-related financial disclosure reporting. At the moment, it will apply to private sector schemes, but MHCLG have indicated that their intention is that there'll be a mirror proposal for the LGPS. It's being phased in to the private sector. It will apply straight away to the LGPS. We'll be required to report from April 2023, which means we'll need to start collecting information from 2022 at the very latest. And MHCLG will be consulting on this between now and then. As the report comes on to say, we have been already reporting under TCFD requirements in our annual report for the last 2 years, but we expect that the mandatory requirements will be perhaps more stringent than what we're reporting at the moment. I thought it'd be helpful, though, with this on the horizon for members to be aware of what will be coming towards us shortly. So addressing the systemic challenges of climate risk has been at the forefront of our responsible investment work. And under Section 3.4 set out the 4 pillars around which TCFD is structured. There's governance and the way that oversight of this risk is taken into account. Then there's the strategy, the process of analysing the fund's resilience to climate-related scenarios, including a 2-degree or less outcome. Then there's the risk management aspect, assessing the financial materiality of climate risk. And then finally, the metrics, actually the figures that we collect and report, mainly around greenhouse gas emissions. And then there's also the side, as the report goes on to say, of engagement and then disclosure of these metrics. The appendix to the report provides an extract from our most recent annual report. And as I say, the information is here for members' information. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Peter. The committee has taken a great interest in the fund's efforts to deal with climate risk in recent years, and it's good that we have this report brought to us to note. I've got a question, if I may, Peter. We've seen some very high-profile court cases recently where oil companies have been, I suppose, well, particularly Shell in the Netherlands, have been told to cut their carbon emissions by very, very large amounts by 2030. So I'm wondering if, given the escalating impacts, I suppose, on oil companies of these legal judgments and the impact on their share prices, are you confident that our current approach is moving fast enough to really deal with the potential fallout in terms of potential stranded assets on fossil fuel companies?
I think it certainly underlines that if there was any uncertainty that ESG issues were non-financial, then they certainly are financial and financially material. Committee approved a strategy in November last year for the fund to adopt a net zero policy and to take steps to move our investment strategy in that direction. I think it's important, Chair, that we do have milestones, and you'll be aware that we're currently working on a more detailed proposal of how we implement the strategy and how we set those milestones. But if nothing else, I think it's very reasonable for you to continue to ask that question to make sure that we do remain on track.
Thanks, Peter. Certainly looking forward to that detailed strategy coming forward and the enhanced policy that will go with it. Any other members want to ask a question on this item? I'm going to get a crick in my neck doing this job if I have to do it much longer. Okay, I don't see any other hands going up, so we are simply asked to note this report. I'll move that recommendation. Can I have a seconder, please? Thanks, Adrian. We can agree by assent. Lovely, thank you. We will move on to item 11, which is the pension board minutes. Peter, do you want to say a few words on these?
Only to say that the minutes are reported to committee as that's part of the governance process for committee to be aware of what the Pension Board is reviewing on behalf of the Administering Authority. I think importantly too, the report notes that the contract of the independent chair has been extended for a further 4 years by the Administering Authority. But it's a noting item. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thanks for that, Peter. I did attend the last meeting of the Pensions Board, and have to say it's something that's well worth doing, and it's another kind of option for people to learn a lot more about the way pensions work. We're very lucky in terms of the quality of the Pension Board that we have, and I would recommend that to anybody if they want to actually attend a Pension Board meeting as an observer. Just ask for it's a virtual meeting. For the time being, at least. The next one is actually tomorrow at 1 o'clock. If anybody's free, that comes recommended, but just ask for the team's invite and you can join in on that. I did have one comment on the minutes, if that's okay. It's on page, let me get my bearings, page 103, the second last paragraph. The last sentence in that paragraph doesn't actually make sense. It should say, including a 2 degrees or less outcome. So that's just a minor point for the minutes. Anybody else want to raise a question or comment on the minutes of the Pension Board? No? Okay, in that case, we are asked to note the contents. I'll move that. Can I have a seconder, please? Thanks, Chris. Okay, can we agree that by assent? Lovely, thank you. Okay, the next item, item 12, is the Northern LGPS update. Back to you, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I think for the benefit of new members of committee, the phrase pooling has probably been used more than once tonight, and the government required LGPS funds back in 2016 to set up asset pools of not less than £25 billion with other LGPS funds, and Merseyside is pooling its assets with both Greater Manchester and West Yorkshire pension funds. To be clear, the Merseyside retains responsibility for its liabilities. It retains its responsibility for setting its strategic allocation, its responsibility for its responsible investment policy, and so on and so forth. But the intention of working together with other funds is to deliver economies of scale, to deliver the capability to invest in asset classes that perhaps as an individual fund one isn't able to invest in, and to invest in different ways, again to deliver cost savings and efficiencies. It's governed by a joint committee that has 2 representatives from each of the 3 funds, 2 elected member representatives, and a further member representative. Again, there'll be 3 of those member representatives. We're waiting for those to be put forward by the trade unions. So the joint committee meets regularly, and the minutes of that joint committee are brought to Pensions Committee for their information. And I think that's probably all I need to say. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks very much for that, Peter. I just repeat what I said during the public questions on page 116. There's the direct reference in those minutes to the stated need to consider human rights issues within the next iteration of our responsible investment policy. Any questions or comments on the minutes, or can we? Yes, Jeff, thank you.
Again, apologies, I'm new. So, again, this seems like a really interesting meeting. But the direct infrastructure platform, I mean, I should put on record my thanks to Peter for the, for the introduction to the committee and the conversation he had. But do you want to, and I think you mentioned as well, didn't you, at a P&R committee around pension fund looking for opportunity. I wonder if you could just speak to me a little bit about what the direct infrastructure platform, JLIL, actually is and does. Is that possible?
Yeah, GLIL for short, isn't that what we call it? Peter will explain everything.
So GLIL came out of Greater Manchester and London Investments Limited, because originally Greater Manchester and the London Pension Fund Authority put £250 million each into a platform to invest indirect infrastructure. As we joined with the Northern LGPS, both West Yorkshire and Merseyside contributed to that platform, both funds and actually staff. So there are members of Merseyside's investment staff working on the GLIL team, as well as West Yorkshire, Greater Manchester, and then as well as the London Pension Fund Authority, there is Lancashire Pension Fund and Berkshire Pension Fund involved. So there are 6 local authority funds who have, to date, pooled about £2.5 billion. We have about 11 direct investments. So by direct investments, it means that we're not giving money to an asset manager to invest on our behalf because they charge fees, and we believe we have sufficient experience to be able to identify opportunities and invest in them and then monitor them. So we have a range of investments. The first investment that was made was a Scottish wind farm. So we own 49% of a wind farm in Scotland. In addition to that, we have a stake in two train rolling stock deals. We have an investment in Anglian Water. We have an investment in some biomass plants, and again, an investment in a PFI platform that invests into schools and hospitals. We don't necessarily have outright control of those investments, but we certainly have negative governance rights, and we own a substantial stake in them, and that is already delivering substantial cost savings to all the funds participating in it. Pleasingly, Nest, which is the national pension scheme for those members of the public that don't have a pension fund that's nominated by their employer, they go into Nest, as do their employer contributions. They've recently undertaken due diligence on GLIL, and they're making an investment of £100 million, and we're hopeful, we're expecting that'll continue for future years. So again, we feel that's a vote of confidence in the fact that we're an FCA regulated entity. We've attracted external capital, which again just helps to build critical mass and to deliver efficiencies. And I think pleasingly, it's philosophically we're aligned as public bodies. We have a long-term ambition to invest in infrastructure to deliver stable returns, and to recognise the fact that there's something there for the public too, we believe. Sorry, I hope that's not too long.
That was really helpful. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Jeff, and thanks, Peter. I think at our P&R committee, I was referring to the Catalyst Fund that is operated specifically by Merseyside Pension Fund, and which invests in local schemes within the city region. Okay, any others? If not, the recommendation is simply to note the minutes. I'll move that. Can I have a seconder? Thanks, Les. And we'll agree by assent, hopefully. Lovely. Thank you all. Right. Item 13 is the working party minutes. Again, Peter, if you want to say a few brief words about our working party minutes.
Thank you, Chair. The working party took place on the 14th of April. Again, it's not a decision-making body, but it reviews investment matters in detail and can make recommendations to committee, and the minutes are brought as a matter of course for committee to approve. So that's the recommendation, please.
Okay, thanks for that, Peter. Peter referred to the working party group meetings as a very useful kind of training exercise as well, and they really are. They are very, very interesting meetings, and I would encourage everybody to attend. The next one is actually this day week at 10:30 a.m. That's a virtual meeting, so look out for the team's invite to that. Any questions or comments on the working party minutes? Yes, Jeff?
Oops, sorry. So do we automatically get invites to those meetings? I take it there are teams invite. They automatically come through. I have to apologise. A whole series of strange initials have appeared in my diary, so I'm presuming that's what they are. Yeah, thank you very much.
And Chair, if I may, I should have clarified that these minutes are actually the Governance and Risk Working Party, which meets 6 monthly and reviews risk and governance and administration matters in more detail, as the Investment Monitoring Working Party does for the investment side. Thank you.
Indeed, sorry, I should have made that clear in my comments. Yeah, IMWP, Investment Monitoring Working Party Minutes. So that's another acronym for you to get used to if you possibly can. Okay, I think I just need to move the recommendation that we note the minutes. Can I have a seconder? Thanks, Chris. Take that as agreed by assent. That is the last item on our agenda for this evening. Can I thank you all for your attendance and your questions. Thanks to Stuart for attending, our member of the public who appeared earlier. And I declare the